Hey everyone. So over the holiday weekend, took my kid to the comic shop just for the heck of it, and he's actually getting into comic books. So I'm just like, yes. And he walked up to this and said, "I want to read this," because we do story time every night. And he likes to usually have a couple of books and a comic book. So it just kind of really, elated me that he grabbed the X-Men. So I decided that I would share it with you all. Too, this collects bits and pieces of all the original X-Men comics. So in true X-Men fashion, we are going to start with issue 1, which the print date originally I think was September 1963, and this was created by Stan Lee, drawn by Jack Kirby, inked by Paul Reinman, and lettered by S. Rosen. Now, according to Marvel Wiki, it says the colorist is uncredited. I looked at another place and it said Stan Goldberg, I think was the name. If you guys know who the original colorist was, let me know so that we can make sure he's accredited here in our community. And of course, a reprint of that just gorgeous classic original issue. I wish I could get my hands on an original copy, but yeah, those prices, you know what I mean? Yeah, I have that Marvel Milestone that came out in the early 90s that had the silver trim around it. And then I also have a reprint, but I didn't want to dig that out when we have this right here. This has some great issues, but sadly, what drives me nuts is after issue 1, it jumps into issue 3, and I'm like, come on. But that aside, let's see what made the X-Men so popular to begin with. Then there was that lull, and we'll be going over something that reignited the X-Men here shortly. So let's dive in. In the main study of an exclusive private school in New York's Westchester County, a strange, silent man sits motionless, brooding, alone with his indescribable thoughts. Finally, his meditation comes to an end. Then, while he remains completely motionless, a sharp commanding thought rings out, echoing through the great halls of the building. "Attention, X-Men, this is Professor Xavier calling. Repeat, this is Professor X calling. You are ordered to appear at once. Class is now in session. Tardiness will be punished." Never within the memory of man was there a class such as this. Never was there a teacher such as Professor X. And never were there students such as the X-Men. And I love that. I think it was for the volume 3, somewhere around the mid-2000s, where Storm kind of became the leader, and that first issue was Wolverine battling the effects of being bit by Dracula. But I love that for the cover they use this kind of classic font. Just great stuff. And after Professor X kind of using that weird commanding voice, Cyclops' presence and accounted for, sir. Iceman right on schedule. The Angel reporting in, sir. The Beast is here, sir. So just great way to bring everybody in and drawing your eye to the center of Professor X with his students gathering around him. It always kind of weirded me out with this issue, though, because Professor X says, you have exactly 3 seconds. You have 15 seconds. I've never seen Xavier do that. So it was just kind of an odd thing, maybe for the time. I don't know. But you can kind of see how they're all kind of young still and green. Bobby, of course, being the youngest of them. Tricking Beast. But one thing while I'm reading this, if you listen to the way these two talk, how Bobby's like, "Hey, Beast, come here. I want to show you a new stunt I learned with my frosting power. Let go of my arm, you blasting walking icicle. You want to freeze me to death? Brr. I don't mind ice cubes, but I like them in Coke, not tickling my arm. Ha! With all those superpowers, you guys are just a bunch of softies. Can't even stand a refreshing dose of ice cubes." And then Beast against softies are we? Just wait till my arm thaws out and I'll make you eat those little words, fella. Now, with all of that, does that remind you of two bickering friends in any other comics? Human Torch and The Thing. So I hate that Beast initially, before we saw the Beast of latter years where he was kind of more that debonair, jokester, scientist, I hate that they made him sound like Beast, primarily because The Thing, just because he kind of has that brutish style. So, for the time, sure, but you can kind of see where he was pulling Johnny and Ben Grimm into this book. And then, of course, we don't have a danger room per se. They just immediately are in a room, and then they start going to these paces, and all these machines start exploding out of everywhere. For the time, though, I could see how that would draw readers in, because we're seeing, look at these people doing death-defying abilities together. So, you have the Fantastic Four, which they're more science-y than you'd have the Avengers. but a lot of them at this time was more brute force to a degree. So just seeing these extraordinary abilities, like Beast being able to one finger this pole vault, whatever you want to call it, and then Angel just flying through these killer tests, and each one just showing that they are still learning. How Warren even says, "Ooh, the first time I ever flew the spanner without a slip." And then I love this because Bobby again is the youngest. So Professor X says, or should I say Bobby says, "Professor, when are you going to stop taking it easy on me? Just because I'm a couple years younger, how am I ever going to graduate at this rate?" And so Professor X, "Some things cannot be rushed, Iceman. You may have 5 minutes of free play doing what you wish." "Well, if he's going to treat me like a kid, then I'm going to act like a kid. I'll need a carrot and some buttons. At least this will get a few laughs out of him." Iceman forgets I can read his thoughts clearly. "Beast, stand by. We will test his reflexes within 10 seconds. Ta-da! Look at me. I'm a snowman. I'm going to go stand on someone's lawn if I don't get something to do around here pretty soon." He's completely off guard. "Now, Beast, hurl that ball. Watch yourself, Iceman. This thing is no soap bubble. Hot diggity, a test for me. At last. Okay, I'll just form a little ice shield out of frozen breath and then right back at you, partner." And I love this because, again, it shows how Bobby is creative, innovative, and how he eventually comes to be an Omega level mutant. Because we see how he's able to change forms later, reconstruct himself from Major Chaos, and then, of course, Cyclops. And the first time we ever see him open his optic blast, and he just takes Beast out in a second. And I love this because Cyclops says, "You're the oldest Beast, so you're first." Yow! "Hey, turn that blasted visor of yours down, will you? You almost knocked me clean through the wall." And then Bobby makes like an ice cube and just rips right through it. And then while we're thinking, wow, where's this going to go? Professor Xavier calls it off to say we have a new student. And Jean says, "Well, what kind of school is this, sir? I have a right to know." "I think you already suspect, Ms. Gray. You see, I can read your thoughts quite clearly, and I know all about your unusual talents. You, Ms. Gray, like the other 4 students at this most exclusive school, are a mutant. You possess an extra power, one which ordinary humans do not. This is why I call my students X-Men, for extra power." And what I love about this little moment here is he introduces the students. He says, "Slim." And so through this whole issue, they keep calling him Slim. It's not until issue 2, which is what irks me about them taking it out of this collected trade. But that's issue 2 is the first time he's called Scott Summers. Through this whole issue, he's only known as Slim. And then what I also like too is Xavier says, "Hey, can you show the students your ability?" And she goes, "Very well, sir. All my life I've had to conceal this power of mine. Now I must admit it's a pleasure to be able to practice," they call it teleportation, openly, without fear of being discovered. And so you see how she just effortlessly moves the book with her thoughts, which, of course, later down the road we call that telekinesis. But it's just sort of interesting to see how the X-Men evolve. And while this kind of goofballing's happening, then we're introduced to Magneto. And he plans his attack on the Cape Citadel military base, which, when we went over X-Men Chronicles, when Magneto is the leader of the X-Men in the Age of Apocalypse, I love how they kind of did an homage back to this issue because Apocalypse's first attack with his horsemen in that universe is on Cape Citadel. So just a cool little way to show how history, no matter what universe, comes together. Now, it's kind of nerdy, but they've kind of used this in later issues, especially, what was it, the aftermath of AVX when Cyclops is in prison. It says, "Within seconds, the entire installation is alarmed, and emergency measures are swiftly brought into play." And then, appearing as though by magic over the heads of the astonished troops, huge letters take shape, composed of dust particles from the air itself, skillfully magnetized into a message seen by the unseen. "Surrender the base or I'll take it by force." And I love how this is all big impact type font, and then all of a sudden, Magneto. Again, it's the 60s. You have to kind of forgive it, but just kind of corny. But you can still see the spirit of the X-Men and how Len Wein, and then, of course, Chris Claremont, and then later writers like Liefeld and Kezia and Liddell kind of captured what Stan Lee and Kirby and Roy Thomas and all of them laid the groundwork here in the beginning. So these military men see that they cannot take down Magneto. No matter what they try, they see that there's just no use. And so we cut back to the mansion. And I just love how you can see that this comic is so dated because Jean's checking herself out in her new uniform. And she goes, whoever designed this uniform could have given Christian Dior a run for his money. And he's sort of like, wow, that's an old topical reference, but you have to appreciate it. But before anything else could be said, Jean's catching the boys spying on him. Then the action happens. And so you see that this remote-controlled Royal Royce rolls the team to the airfield. And then minutes later, in the professor's remote-controlled private jet, the X-Men and Marvel Girl are winged towards Cape Citadel at nearly top the sound of speed. And so like, where's the Blackbird? But again, they didn't have all that groundwork yet. And then we see for the first time Cyclops really opening up on Magneto's magnetic field. And now I'll switch to maximum power. I can only maintain this pressure for a few seconds, but I did it. So we see how powerful Scott can be. But for only being able to hold it for a few minutes, it knocks him unconscious. And so even B says Cyclops almost knocked himself out. He got us in here. Now let's prove that we can carry the ball. And even as the battle ensues, Magneto even says, despite their seeming youth and inexperience, they are mighty antagonists. Must never again make the mistake of underestimating them. But I shall still prove to be their master. And again, look at this. I love these old training uniforms, just that black and yellow. I'm glad that Shadow Cat sort of kind of kept that as her default uniform because Kitty just knows how to rock it. And just this first class just looks spectacular like this. Though I'm glad that later as they graduated and whatnot, Jean created their new uniforms. And you can just kind of see how the color increases and shows their individuality as they grow and progress. So, of course, Magneto flees. And what's kind of interesting is it's not till later issues that we see that Magneto and Xavier have any type of relationship together. Like you'd think that this is just some rando villain at this moment. It's not until later issues you kind of start to see the relationship. But what's kind of interesting about this issue, other than Cyclops being called Slim and all that stuff, is Xavier tells Jean when he first meets her that he may be bound to a wheelchair because of a childhood incident. So I'm kind of glad that got retconned later to show that he lost his ability to walk when he was overseas and met Magneto, and they tried to work together to achieve their dream. But that it was Count, something like Dracula. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but Xavier is crushed by a rock, which renders his legs useless. So just kind of interesting to see here in the beginning compared to the X-Men that we know, and kind of appreciate where the X-Men came from all this groundwork laid by the masters of the original Marvel comics. So if you guys have enjoyed what you've seen, if you got the ducats, I highly recommend to go support your local comic shop and grab an original copy. If not, there are reprints left and right. You can also grab it in collected trades such as this, which, as you can see, there's a lot to go, so we will be going over this here and there. The next one will be X-Men number 3. And if you've enjoyed this review, really would appreciate if you take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Helps the channel more than you could possibly know. And if you mind hitting that fancy little X bell next subscribe, that way we continue to upload content, you guys get notified. Come to the channel, and I love talking with you on hearing your thoughts and feedback down in the comments below or the socials, which I'll make sure to leave the links down in the description. So with all that said, hope y'all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, everyone.